Today we'll be giving an overview and review of the 4 towers. Tall towers. Lots of towers.
4 of them.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy, the Gaming Maven.
And I'm Stephane, the games teacher.
And today we're going to talk about the 4 towers. But before we get to that, let's discuss timestamps. Are you looking to see what the setup looks like? Looking to see what we think? Well, click on a timestamp below.
We don't know how we're doing unless you give us feedback, so leave us a comment and subscribe to the channel to be notified when we post new content.
And with that, we've got 4 towers set up and ready to go, so let's get to it.
In 4 towers, players compete to be the player who gets the most points by creating lords and demons, getting champion cards, and placing peasants as followers, merchants, mountaineers, or mercenaries.
So here we have the components for 4 towers. We have our main game board, our champion cards, our player aids, our mini boards for demons and lords, our gems, our player influence markers. Then we have our player boards, one for followers and one for our merchants, mercenaries, and mountaineers. Then we have the meeples that will represent the various people in the game. Here we have the setup for 4 towers. When we play out the game board, we are then going to put 1 meeple of each of the colors on its matching spot in the starting part of the central board. There are going to be a number of each colored meeple played out depending upon the number of players. Any extra meeples are played out to the champion's temple, as well as any extra gems that are not placed on the influence track. So the influence track, you place out gems on the marked spots. Each player will place their influence marker on the bottom of the influence track. The champion cards will be shuffled and 3 will be played face up, with the rest of the deck being played face down next to it. The Lord and Demon mini boards are played to the side of the main game board, and each player will take a followers board as well as a merchants, mercenaries, and mountaineers board. On a player's turn, a player has 3 mandatory actions that they must play, and there are optional actions before and after those mandatory actions. Everything must be followed in order, so I always recommend to keep the player aid close by for reference. So first we're going to discuss the 3 mandatory actions. The first thing you are going to do is draw 3 peasants from the peasant supply. You can draw it in any combination, so all from one pile or from different piles, however you would like. When you draw the 3, the next mandatory action is to play a peasant on the board. When you play a peasant on the board, you can play a different color as long as there's only a single peasant there. If there is 2 peasants, you must play one of the 2 colors that are there. If you play a 3rd peasant to a spot on the board, an expansion will happen. So first, the thing that's going to happen is all the expansions will resolve. What happens is there are 3 lines going up from each space on the board. You will then move one of the meeples along each line to kind of expand, obviously, out from the spot that you started from. This is the way to get lords by going out to the edge, or creating demons by going towards the center. The next thing you'll do is you'll take the 2 meeples that you have left and you'll play them to your board. If you play them to your followers, they can be used for endgame scoring. As well, they can be sacrificed to purchase champion cards. If you play them to your occupations board and becoming a merchant, a mercenary, or mountaineer, they also count towards endgame scoring, but they can be sacrificed depending upon what you are trying to do. So we will actually play that to there, and we will play this to here. Now, the only spot that on the merchants, let's talk about the merchants first. So the merchants, first of all, there are 4 colors plus a white. So the white allows you to play any color meeple there, but obviously the other colors you have to match a meeple. So you can only play one of each other color normally, plus whatever one you play on the wild spot. When you play them to merchants, they can be used for endgame scoring. Also, when you fill up the merchant row, if you have 2 champion cards, or as soon as you get 2 champion cards, you can get a 3rd champion for free. so you do not have to do the required sacrifice, which we'll discuss in a second. You can also sacrifice any of the meeples here by taking it off and playing it to a champion card to replace a spirit that has already been used. So if a card talks about spirits and you have utilized the spirits that are on that board, you can then sacrifice one of your merchants to play on that board to be able to continue to take the action of that champion. The mercenaries allow you to gain double influence if at the end of the game you have 7 or more. You also score for them at the end of the game. In addition, you can take one off, you can sacrifice a mercenary to kill a peasant on the board. This may be helpful if you notice someone is going for a particular color and you want to try to reduce the chances of that color expanding and becoming lords. Or possibly someone turning one of the colors you want into demons. Mountaineers are also very helpful. Now, mountaineers do have to be played based on the color. Each spot has 2 colors. So, and these two, both mercenaries and mountaineers, must be played left or right. You can play the merchants, you can place them down in any color. The mountaineers do have to be placed matching the color that's on the spot. If you have the lead at the end of the game, you'll have ×4 points for each mercenary, each mountaineer, or you'll have ×2. Everyone else will have ×2. You can sacrifice one of your mountaineers to lead a peasant from the hills into the mountains. So from one of the green colored locations to one of the blue colored locations into the mountains. This is very handy to get them to come off of the board in future turns to become lords. Now we're going to discuss the optional actions. The optional actions, again, like everything else, have to be played in a very specific order as per your player aid. The first thing you can do is you gain a 3rd champion card. So how do you gain a 3rd champion card? You choose from the 3 that are available. However, you don't have to make the normal sacrifice of followers, but you do need to have all of your merchants. So you need to have 5 merchants and you need to have 2 champions already. Once that happens, you can gain a 3rd merchant for no cost and you will still get the benefits below. The next thing you can do is sacrifice followers to gain a champion card. So if you have no champion cards or you are looking to try to get your 3rd free one, you can sacrifice followers by taking them and moving them from your followers board to the champion's temple. You put a certain number based on how many are on this top right hand corner, so usually 2 or 3. What then happens is you get that champion card. It is immediately replaced with a new one, and it has a special skill. It will usually either allow you to place gems from the champion's temple or spirits if it says on it. Then you will get to take the action either at the beginning of your turn, at the end of your turn, depending upon what the text says. Each special champion card also has a bonus, and it's usually end game scoring, so you want to be very aware of that as well, and you're trying to pick champions that help your specific strategy. The next thing you can do is sacrifice a merchant and eliminate a peasant from play, as we discussed before. So you would sacrifice one and you would also take the merchant and put them both in the champion's temple. You sacrifice a mountaineer to basically move a peasant from, like I said, the hills to the mountains. So you would sacrifice that by putting it into the champion's temple, and you would get to move one of the meeples, peasants from the hills into the mountains. The next thing you can do is sacrifice, as I mentioned earlier, a merchant to become a spirit. So you sacrifice that one, play it directly from the merchant's area onto your champion card. Again, it's only if the card has spirits versus gems. Once you expend gems, the only way to do that is to move up on the influence board. After the 3, these are the actions that can happen before your mandatory actions. Then there is one more action you can take after your mandatory actions, and it is use one or more of your champion card skills that say specifically at the end of your turn. So if any of these that you have on your part of the board or part of your player area say end of your turn, you can play them at the end of your turn. So what happens when you move into when you have expansions from out of the mountains into the Lord area or into the City of Fire? When citizens expand to the City of Fire, when you expand out and they go into the City of Fire, that peasant will go to the mini board for the demons. What happens in that case is if there is a lord of the matching color, one of those lords would get changed. So if there was a yellow lord here, it would get pulled down into a demon. So it's strategically a great way of getting your opponent's colors that they're working on and their followers to become demons instead of lords, because lords are helpful and demons are not. When you expand from this area, so let's just say we had played this out and then you expand, again everything expands and this would go here. This would now become a lord. When a person creates a lord, their influence track will move up, and this gives them endgame scoring. Plus, as soon as the first person reaches these marked spots, they will also collect the gem, which could be helpful for champion cards, and they're also good for endgame scoring. The game will end when players have had an equal number of turns and the last player has taken the last 3 peasants from the board and played them to their board and to the main board and their own personal boards. Then endgame scoring will commence. The player aid actually has the endgame scoring on the other side, so you can use it as a handy dandy little cheat sheet. The first thing players will do is they will look at their followers and they will multiply the number of followers of a color with the number of lords created for that color. So in this case, player would get 4 times 4 for 16. And they would do the same thing for all 4 colors. Each player will then score 2 points per mercenary. So you would basically get 2 times each of those. Each merchant is also worth 2 points. The mountaineers will score you 2 points unless you have the lead. So in this case, this player has more than the opponent, so they would get 4 times the number of mountaineers they have. You will score any bonuses on your champion cards as per the bottom. Any unused gem or spirit that are on your champion cards will score you 1 point. You will score the number of influence points as where your marker is on the influence track. You will score double points if you have a gem on your marker. So you can possibly play a gem to your marker, you will score double the points. The person with the most points at the end of the game wins. So now we're ready to give our review of 4 Towers. So Stephane, what do you think?
I really like the game mechanics. I found thematically maybe the game needs a little bit more polish for my tastes.
The mechanics were great. So the trick is it's an abstract game at its heart, but then add some Euro mechanics of the workers and the cards, the champion cards. So it's just trying to find the balance between those two. But I quite enjoyed it from pretty much start to finish the times we played it. So this is a prototype we have. So the art on it is a little it's prototype. So some of it's finalized art, some of it's not, so things may change from what you're going to see. But let's talk a little bit about art and theme. So the art particularly.
I really like the art on the cards, it's pretty fantastic, but I found the graphic design of the game board to be a little bit too busy for my tastes.
Really? Okay. Because like you said, we said it was an abstract game, that part of the board looks like an abstract game, so it's just like movements and paths and stuff, and then you have the champion cards and stuff. I personally didn't find it particularly busy, but I like it because you kind of can see if you go to the center, it's to the City of Fire, and stay outside, it's to the towers where you're trying to get your lords. So it's visually very easy to follow where you're supposed to move your guys to and why. So, but I can see how for some it definitely can be busy, so that makes sense for sure. So theme, in this one the idea is you're a demigod and you're trying to create lords, or sometimes you're trying to create demons. So depending on how you want to go towards the center of the board to maybe stymie your opponent, depending on what colors they're going for versus what colors you're going for, so on and so forth.
And the demons cancel out a lord. When you create a demon, you lose a lord if one exists of the same color. So you can kind of negate scoring options for opponents by doing that as well. So
exactly. So I think it works well in that strategically you have to decide, do you want to make them this, or you want to make them this, and it's going to maybe hurt you or your opponents depending on how you work it. Plus the champion cards really fit into that too. The different creatures of those cards work towards the theme quite well. So let's talk a little bit about components. Again, this is a prototype, but we've seen 2 prototypes now. This is the second prototype of this game we've seen. So what do you think?
The game board's solid. The card stock is fairly good, given that we're still looking at a prototype. And it's got a number of colored meeples. Now the colored meeples are fairly standard, the standard primary colors and green. and green's not a primary color.
Close enough. Secondary.
Yeah.
It works.
And they're standard meeples. I mean, maybe in a Kickstarted game they could bling out the meeples a little bit, but they work for what they are.
And there's a lot of them, so
quite a
bling
few.
out that many meeples would probably make it pretty pricey.
Yeah.
Now, what I particularly want to comment on is I really like the champion cards because they're kind of like a tarot shape. I don't know if they're full tarot size, but I do think that I like the look of them. There's a lot of text on them, so this game would be needed for someone who has strong reading skills, obviously.
Yeah.
But I quite like the look of them and how they fit and stuff.
And the text on the cards is a little small for reading across the table. I mean, you can pick up the card and look at it and read it fairly easily, but when you're sitting across the table from the card, you typically have to, reach over, grab the card. You can't just see it at a glance because there's a fair amount of text.
Yeah. Now, in our case, we just happen to have a really large table. So the average Joe who has like a normal size table probably would be fine. But yeah, it's like our table's like a million miles wide. So let's talk about game mechanics because this is the part where I think this game really shines.
I enjoy the action selection that you have, and you have a number of varied selections, and there's a specific order of the actions that you have to take, with 3 actions being compulsory, obligatory, required.
Any of those words work.
Yeah. And so, you take peasants from from 3 peasants from one of the 4 piles, or you can spread them out however you want, all of one color or multiple colors, whatever, and then place them according to the rules of the game. And that allows you for some interesting strategizing because you can try and go with just one color and score points mostly with a single color, but you can try and spread yourself out multiple ways. I really enjoy the mechanics of this game.
So because it's an abstract, I love abstracts. Quarto, Corridor, all those other types of games, but this brings in the Euro game aspect, which I also really love. So 2 major mechanics or types of games that I really, really love. So the idea is if you're not abstract, that's fine, because you can still usually manipulate how things are going on the board with your cards, with the various like mercenaries and merchants. Those can allow you to affect the board as well. So it's not all relied on the abstract aspect of the game, but it is the biggest way to move them across the board to manipulate which ones are going to become lords, which ones are going to become demons. So I really quite enjoy that. I also do like, this is something you and I discussed, the restriction of champion cards. So the one thing I found about this rulebook, even the very first time I read it, it was really easy to understand. I needed to ask the designer very few questions because it was very well done. So that for me was like positive right off the bat before we even played it, because you wouldn't believe how many even like finished game rule books are not so great. So that was really good. It was easy to understand. There's very little confusion. But the big thing we talked about was the cards. But you can only have 3 in a game, and you talked about the idea of maybe wanting to be able to switch one out and have another one.
As the game progresses, some of your cards, all the champion cards have endgame scoring conditions. And as the game progresses, you may find that your champion card's not going to score you any points at the end of the game. And, oh well, tough cookies. You can't swap them out. I would have appreciated, personally, a way to maybe decide, this champion card's not working for me anymore. Pay some penalty or whatever, but be able to change it for one that's available now on the offer.
Yeah.
And that, the rules quite clearly state, you get it, it's yours till the end of the game. I would have appreciated maybe a bit more flexibility with that.
Versus, and so this is one of the few games where a couple of things we have different opinions on, which is great. For me, I actually think it's a good thing because if you buy all 2 of them early on and get your 3rd one after you fill your market spots, then you're stuck with those, and maybe the strategy changes, or maybe things alter throughout the game that don't allow you to score on those, and you are restricted, and that is why you might want to spread out your buying of them, or really work with the cards you have to get them to work with your strategy and try to manage that, especially with the opponents maybe changing things on you. So I think it actually is a good thing because it restricts what you're able to do and forces you to kind of plan ahead, because in most abstract games you need to plan 3 or 4 moves ahead, so it's kind of similar that way. So yeah, but I do also like that the movements are obligatory. There's a couple times where I had to, or optional versus obligatory, and the order has to follow. I was like, oh, I forgot to do that, and that would have really helped me. And I see why it needs to happen first, but I was like, darn, wish I could have done that and I didn't do it, and I can't do it now because it won't help me, so you got to plan ahead for that. So let's talk about similar games. There aren't a lot of games that do abstract and Euro together. I kind of racked my brain with this, and I know a lot of abstract games, like I said, Quarto, Corridor, many of the Gigamic games. Is there any games that do both together?
I can't think of any.
There's one that's right there.
There are certainly other games that combine abstract and Euro, but I can't think of any game that I would compare this to. Nothing quite comparable. So it seems to be
pretty unique. Yeah. Unique take on the combination of the two, the melding of the two. So that's really great. When I played it, I saw it at first glance, I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. And then when I played it, I was like, yes, I definitely like this. So this is really cool how he melded the two together, and it's great that way. So, final thoughts.
Again, I really enjoyed the mechanics of this game. The card art is fantastic. For me, the game board's a little busy. All in all, I give it a big thumbs up.
So for me, like I said, this was a game I kind of had asked for, and I was glad it delivered to what I was looking for, because it really is a good game. I know the art is going to change. The board might even change. So they might find I might simplify the board or change it. So this is not the final say in regards to the art or the board or anything like that. So we'll see how that goes through the Kickstarter and then post Kickstarter and stuff like that. But game mechanics are, of course, the biggest part of a game. If a game is a solid game, and you can usually kind of gloss over all the other stuff. But as long as it works well and it makes sense to you and you enjoy it, then it's great. And that for me makes it 2 big thumbs up. So that total of 3 thumbs up. So with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.